Hello, everybody. Welcome back once again to the Crew First Culture podcast. My name is Jeremy. And as always, I want to thank you very much for spending some time with us today. I want to respect that time. And with that being said, I've got a great guest that I've been looking forward to having on for a while. One that anybody out there that is a podcast listener probably knows, but we're going to maybe learn a little bit more about him. But with that being said, today I have James Geering on. How you doing, James?
Very well. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
No problem. I've had a few, other podcast hosts on before, and kind of one of the reasons I do that is I've been on a few as well as a guest. And I think anybody that hosts a podcast, they enjoy it obviously, but being on the other side and just being able to enjoy the conversation and not have to worry about where it's going and time constraints and all that, it was just enjoyable for me. And so hopefully, getting other hosts on as guests and just let them have a little bit of a freer time and enjoy themselves. So I appreciate you coming on.
No, thank you. I think the good thing about hosting is you also are a sponge then for all the people that you've had on. So as a guest, I feel like I get a chance to disseminate some of that amazing knowledge that I've been lucky enough to absorb.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. I am way newer in the podcast journey than you. How long have you been doing yours?
Just over 4 years. So it's funny. It seems like so much longer, but yeah, yeah, things will pop up in my memory. And it was the person I interviewed only a year ago, and it seems like three. So, but yeah, but that's a good stretch of time, not a bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we get in, I tend to jump ahead of myself a lot because I get excited about having the conversations. But and to just get a little bit of a bio out there for people that either don't know you or don't know much from you. And we kind of talked about this before pushing record. It is as much or as little as you want to talk about. Just kind of give us a bio on James Geering, who he is, who he was, and go from there.
Yeah, so a brief overview. I grew up in England on a farm, so it was a pretty awesome upbringing. My dad was a veterinarian. He's actually been on my podcast. Grew up seeing medicine through a veterinary lens. As a child, I wanted to be a doctor and a firefighter and a stuntman. And then I went to a medical when I was a school age, and they told me I was colorblind and said, no, you can't be a firefighter. You don't qualify. So I believed that myth for a long time. So it took me, I did some lifeguarding. I ended up becoming a stuntman, which is quite a funny thing. Not many people can say they achieved everything that they want to be as a kid. Um, so it took me really to have worked in Japan doing stunts and met an American girl, and we got married. And so we decided to move to the States. And right before we did, I read this article on a Miami-Dade firefighter in Muscle and Fitness. And kind of the flame was reignited. And at that point, I was old enough to start thinking for myself and question the whole color blindness thing, seeing as I could see colors. I'm not the sharpest tool in the box. I say this a lot, and but it's true. Like, it took me a long time to realize I wasn't colorblind, or at least the clinical diagnosis of. So very long story short, where we landed in the US was literally about 3 or 4 miles from a fire academy in Orlando. So I went there and was like, well, screw it. If it comes to that, I'm going to ask them just to name some things, and I'll tell them, what color it is. And that's exactly what happened. So that's why I was never a firefighter in the UK, because I believed a lie, pretty much. Sadly, someone puts on a white coat and hangs a stethoscope around the neck, we take their words as gospel. And that's one of the things that on my mission now, is to get people to question. There are some people that wear those outfits that are incredible, wellness gurus, but there are some that are, not people that you want to take wellness from advice from. So anyway, long story short, 17 years ago now, I went through the fire academy, and then it was in Orlando, and then my very first department was Hialeah in Florida.
Very good. So that kind of leads me to just a personal question. I've got, at least I can think of, trying to think for sure, but I know at least 3 people that I have on my department that are colorblind. And so it's interesting to me that, is that just a UK thing that they just do not allow that, or do you
I
know?
think that when I was testing years ago, it was more stringent. I think they were strict on height and, all kinds of other things too. I think
Oh, yeah.
it was within parameters too. You couldn't be too tall either, if I'm not mistaken. So it was very weird.
Yeah.
But it was also, I think it's the way that people used to tell us about color vision was the exact same parallel would be you're either 20/20 or you're completely blind, Stevie
Yeah.
Wonder blind,
I got you.
and that's not how color vision works.
Yeah.
We have these deficits that are not going to interfere with your work in any way, shape, or form. So there are true colorblind people, and it's more challenging. But even now, as people have seen, you've got these glasses that you can overcome that too. So I think that was it. I was never told, hey, this is a challenge and this is, how you'll be able to work around it or work towards it. It was just, you're off the list. No fighter pilot, no firefighter, nothing cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was that it was the polar opposite of you can do anything in life, put
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah. So I guess you do have some type of scale of colorblind, and you're just not completely. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I would
I
probably
got you.
not be the best host for Queer Eye for the White Guy, but because my shades are not very good. But as far as, any sort of regular profession that doesn't involve an acute spectrum of color vision, then I'm absolutely fine. Yeah, I can see now you're wearing a blue shirt, so
Yeah. Blue shirt. Yeah. Pretty close.
he's wearing a red shirt.
Yeah. I was gonna say, for a second I was just gonna let it go, but yes, for those listening, yes, I am wearing a red shirt, and he did throw me for a loop there for a second. I didn't want to call him out, but so part of your story, I'm going to have to dig in just a little bit before we move on to the good stuff. But we I live in Oklahoma, up by Tulsa, and we live on I call it a farm. We got 10 acres, we got lots of animals. So to me, it's a farm. So, I obviously I relate to the farm life story as you're growing up. So what did your farm look like growing up?
So it was purely aimed at the housing the horses that we had. So, we'd board a lot of horses. Some would just stay literally for boarding. Some would stay obviously while they were being, rehabbed or treated. And then we had sheep as well. So, and then, some pigs, so they would go to slaughter. So it was a kind of, paradox, because some animals were there to get better, some animals were there to be eaten.
Yeah.
So, but it was, yeah, apart from that, it was I think if you added it all together, it was about 60 acres. So it was pretty big. So I
Yeah.
grew up, tearing around on motorbikes and, all the different, machinery that we had, and seeing, I think the big powerful thing that really uh, formed me, if you like, is we had all walks of life walk through the door, because, people of all backgrounds own horses at some point. So
Yeah.
we had, travelers, gypsies that would come, and my dad would do some pro bono work. If he knew people didn't have any money, and their animal was sick, he would just treat it. And then we had members of the extended royal family, bring their horses. So you really kind of got this amazing lens on people, and that they're, really two types: nice people and not nice people. And it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what your color, creed, socioeconomic status is. It's just if you, are a nice person or not.
Yeah. No, I love this. This is, and my wife is the same way. This is what we love. We would not do well in a, apartment environment, somewhere tied in and enclosed. We just love this. And, we've got lots of kids. Some of them agree, some of them like to be outside, some of them don't. And so it's just a mix that's always just, you just never know what the day looks like. But man, I have really enjoyed the lessons that the farm can pass on to our kids, and what to me too. You learn the value of life. And I say that we've got goats that are having babies right now, and that's one of the most fun things that we have to do around here, is playing with babies. And and things like that. But just caring for others, caring for other things, work ethic, and all that. I just think that's so valuable to be able to have that out there. Do you feel like you gained some of who you are from just that farm aspect?
Yeah, no, it's funny you said about birthing the goats. Like I would go to school, and I think I've told this before, but I'd go to school exhausted, junior school, and get berated by the teacher saying, "Oh, you were probably up watching TV," and I wasn't. I was lambing, or there's some emergency came in, some dog was hit by a car, and we were up through the night taking care of him. So yeah, it really it really forged that compassion, absolutely. And then I think there's an element of gratitude when you grow up on a farm and you do live a simple life. I literally would be out all day. That whole street lights coming on. We didn't even have street lights, so when it was dark, it was dark.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, but you kind of find wonder in nature, in the birds, and just walking through a field and seeing what runs through the grass or flies over you, and seeing the results from an animal being hunted by a fox or whatever. You just to me, it's such a great baseline. So then fast forward 20 years, if you break your cell phone, it's not the end of the world, because
yeah,
you go back to what life
yeah,
is truly about. So yeah, I think I wish everyone could experience the ocean. I wish everyone could experience the wild, whether it's the mountains or the prairies or whatever it is, because I think when people are disconnected from nature, especially at the moment, this last
yeah.
year, I think it's very toxic to the human spirit.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I couldn't agree with you more on that. A little bit of a funny story. I was on shift on Tuesday. Yes, Tuesday, and one of our goats was having a baby. So my wife was here by herself. She's a nurse, so she could definitely handle it. But it was breech, and so she was there trying to help the mama. And her friend who lives down the road was on YouTube looking up videos on how to deliver a breech baby goat. And I'm sure it was a very, very comical scene I got to miss out on. But yeah, I can't agree with you more on the whole. This is the stuff that's important. It's not how irritating it is to wear a mask. It's not how irritating it is to have to go pick up the same person 3 times in 2 days. It's life. And I don't know how. I've said this almost a year now since this whole COVID thing started. I don't know how I would have made it through all this if I didn't have this outlet to get out and really enjoy life like this. And so I'm sure people that don't are really struggling. So I get it.
And I think sadly, the conversation is the life that you're living now. That's where our focus needs to be as well. The virus is here, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
So we literally cannot control it. We pretend we
Yeah.
can control it, but clearly we can't, because so many places have locked down
Yeah.
and it's still running rampant. But what we can control is what we do to our food, what we do to our air, what we do to our ground. So if we had spent the last year also, not instead, also talking about the quality of the health in our country, the quality of our food, the ability to move, what we're feeding our kids in school, what we're teaching our kids about food in school, how we're supporting local farmers, we could be a year healthier, and
Yeah.
therefore far more resilient. So that's what I find, is that the argument has been about masks or no masks, and I wear a mask where I'm asked, and I don't wear a mask where I don't have to. But
Yeah.
if there was the same energy put into overall wellness of each of the countries that's affected, the world would be a better place. But sadly, our new normal should be so much better when we come out of this, but it's not, because people
Yeah.
haven't learned a damn thing.
Yeah, man, I am with you right there. And that's almost, for some reason, I have just almost adopted a personal mission just to fight the negativity of this stuff. And it keeps getting more and more, I don't know what, intense, I guess, the feeling inside. And I guess it's just I'm passionate about it, but I'm just so tired of the negative stuff. I'm so tired of seeing negative stuff. I'm so tired of hearing it. I don't have any patience for it anymore. I don't care.
Mhm.
If it's not anything that I can control, then don't waste my time on it. If it's going to be something negative, I don't care to hear that. And I think that's kind of my area. I know you have your area that's more in the health and mental health type sides of that same conversation, but it's all part of the big picture of same deal.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly it. The core of my project is positivity. And obviously, people not dying is a positive thing. So that's a big
Yeah,
element. But yeah, when I have people on, each one of these people, their mission is to do something good in the world. I couldn't care less, if you were pop star X or, music guru Y. If you're not a good person, I don't want you on my show.
yeah,
That's why it doesn't matter of fame or following, whatever. Every single person that's been on there has brought something that's going to positively affect the people that listen. And the same with my social media, even though social media isn't really, in itself, a currency, as it were. You have an opportunity to put positivity out there. I mean, I just shared um, a post from a site called Positive News in the UK, of Muhammad Ali stopping a Vietnam vet from committing suicide. I'd never heard that story. What a beautiful story that he showed up and made a difference, and I'm sure that man admired him, so he was the person at that moment that could talk him off the ledge, and he physically did.
yeah,
Those are the stories we need to see.
yeah,
Was the invasion of the government building bad? Yes. As were the BLM riots. They were all bad. So you don't need to argue left or right.
yeah,
Yes, if you're assaulting police officers and burning businesses to the ground and invading government buildings, you're all horrible people. So actually, you're all in complete agreement that you're all assholes. So,
yeah,
but the rest of us are in the middle going, we just want we want positivity.
yeah,
We want good leadership. And let me be clear, I haven't seen any, in the last 8 and upcoming 4. So, that same machine is churning out the same
yeah,
person, in my opinion, with different colored ties. But yeah, I think that's exactly what this country needs, is to understand the values that so many of these religious doctrines that people seem to adhere to, and actually be like Jesus, Buddha, whoever it is that you follow, and start being a decent human being.
yeah, yeah. That's the sad thing is there are so many stories like the Muhammad Ali story you just kind of mentioned. Those things happen every day. They're everywhere. There is so many great stories out there, and I completely agree with you. That's what I want to hear. And I feel like if it was out there more readily available, then others would start enjoying those things as well because they make you feel good, they make you happy, they make you want to be better yourself. And so yeah, I wish that was the case. I wish that was the normal. You turn on the news and you see about all the people that have, done charitable things today, or all the people that have saved somebody from, certain death or whatever else. Those are the things that I wish were the norm for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are events we need to know about, and I have to say I've always loved the BBC coming from England, because overall, I'm sure they've got a slight lean in some things like Brexit or whatever it was, but overall, their news has always been, hey, this happened, it was awful. Next
Yeah.
story, hey, this happened, but it's not like again, all these experts and these divided screens that we see that ironically are a polar, a mirror image of the opposing news
Yeah.
agencies. And I use the word news very loosely, but they just say, here's what happened. But then there's also positive stories, and when I
Yeah.
was young, there was a news show for kids called John Craven's News Round, another show called Blue Peter, and they would do fundraisers. So when we found out there was a famine in Ethiopia, they would get all the British people, and these kids would be, doing little lemonade stands or versions of back home to raise money for these people that we saw going through these horrific things in the news. That's what you need to see. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes there are bad things. So what can we do to help it, instead
Yeah.
of ignoring all the bad things that we can make a difference in, and hyping up these triggering events from these horrible people, and giving the worst of society all the airtime. It just seems
Yeah.
insanity to me. But sadly, if you have news where their whole goal is to sell advertising space,
Yeah.
you're doomed from the get-go. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think when I first started doing kind of getting into the social media a little bit more and kind of starting the crew first thing, I saw some of that stuff, but it was very easy for me to just get away from it because as far as social media goes, you can take people out of your feed really easy. If
Hmm.
there's somebody that's adding something negative into your feed, take it out and it's gone. And so for me now, I don't ever see any of, anything political, anything negative. It's just people that are passionate about doing better every day. And so to me, I love what social media brings, at least to me and to, kind of my circle. But that's because I don't allow that negative stuff to affect it. And so, a lot of people obviously have negative kind of connotations with social media, but that it's that easy. It's just if you think it's a bad deal, then just take the bad stuff out and just focus on the good. That do you kind of have you had any thoughts kind of in that same arena?
Oh, I do exactly the same. My social media fields are super positive because if someone comes on and is an a-hole, I delete and block them. I
Yeah.
like there's no second chances. If you come on to in it'd be no difference if you walked in my front door and then took a shit. Like
Yeah.
it's exactly what you've done. You've come into my space and you've been a complete a-hole. So no,
Yeah.
I mean, if someone has a slight disagreement and is intelligent, obviously
Yeah.
I'll throw another response back. And I'm not just, gonna just cut everyone, but yeah, there's many negative people. That's fine. Go hang out with the other negative people. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think this is a great way of doing that. And it's not censorship. It's again fostering kindness and compassion, two very different things. But
Yeah.
then the other thing is I unplugged my TV about 10 years ago. We've been on Netflix and Amazon now for a decade. So I don't get that on the goggle box either. I don't get that constant propaganda. And that wasn't even from the news. Or initially, it was because my son would quote QVC commercials at the age of 4. I'm like, this is insane. He's trying to watch, whatever it was, the Wonder Pets or something. And he's
Mhm.
telling me about this amazing vegetable knife that you can get for 19.99, So you've got to think about that too. The advertising that these channels are using to fund themselves are also bombarding you and your kids. So yeah, it's I don't know, it's just crazy to me. But now we, the people, really have a lot of power. We can disconnect our devices completely, and we can subscribe and watch shows that your kids are only going to see that exact show that you want them to.
Yeah.
So I think seeing like documentaries on Netflix and some of these things, there's an absolute desire for well-made information. And I think I'm telling you that I guarantee the news agencies are panicking, because to me they're no different now to than reality TV. They're that trashy.
Yeah.
That they're a disgrace to journalism, in my opinion.
It's funny you say that. That's exactly what we have here. We haven't had cable or even local channels, and I'm sitting here trying to think. I don't even know. It's definitely not been 10 years, but it's probably been over a year or two for us as well. And literally the only time I ever see any news at all is when I go into the firehouse and it's on the TV. And if it's on my office in the morning, it's probably one of the first things I do when I get there is turn it off because
Hmm.
I don't have any need for it. But yeah, it's just funny that the correlations between kind of the two minds and how trying to stay positive and trying to have a better life, we're going about them in a very similar way, I would say.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So we talked about your podcast. I haven't even mentioned the name of it for those that haven't heard of it. So you have the Behind the Shield podcast. You said you've done it for about 4 years now. So just kind of get into that. If you want to get into kind of where it started, if you want to get into just what you enjoy about it, we'll just talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah. So, it was born out of tragedy, basically. About 10 years into my career, we had a couple of really awful years here where we lost 6 first responders that I knew personally, that I worked with. Um, And then, outside of that, so many more. So after going to 6 funerals, it was crushing. So I'd listened to podcasts myself for a while, Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, the old Barbell Shrug crew, Squad Room, just to give them a shout out as inspiring my inception, or this inception. But so I knew there was great information out there. I have a history. I've graduated from University of London and then UF with exercise physiology. I've been a coach. I've been an athlete. So I'm not an expert, but I was versed enough to understand where there was good information. And sadly, the fire service, we don't have a lot of good wellness information. We certainly didn't a few years ago.
Yeah.
There was some people out there that were trying, but overall, what was being accepted by our union, by some of the organizations, was out of date and just downright wrong, some of it. So I would hear the right people on other people's podcasts and go, this person needs to speak to the fire service. So initially, I was looking for a podcast, assuming there's already one out there. And we have some great, well, had back then, at that time, some great podcasts on leadership, on tactics, some of these things, but nothing really that was focusing purely on wellness. And so I was like, all right, well, that's my sign, I guess, to do it myself. So initially it was kind of aimed at the fire service, but very, very early on, I realized that all these guests pertain to everyone. So I started looking at the firefighter as a human being instead of the profession. So I didn't want it to be all about, the job. So then my guest list immediately got very, very diverse. So I've had everyone from, the sporting community, the, medical, military, a lot of special forces people, law enforcement, you name it. And then with that kindness and compassion, a lot of very powerful stories of people completely removed from the tactical space that are just inspiring human beings. And then some people that have solutions, from people in other countries that are doing things better than the UK, doing things better than the US, that we can, if we have humility, can learn from and save a lot of lives. So it's kind of, morphed now into this beautiful human podcast where, there's so many of those lines intersect, the Venn diagram, and that middle part is where the truth is, so the more people, for example, I get in the sleep medicine world, the more we can destroy this myth of I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, it's not a myth, you will, and your death will be way sooner. But
Yeah.
try and if you've got Navy SEALs and Army and Navy and Air Force and the sporting community and all these people saying the same thing, hopefully we can get the fire service to understand that our shift work is killing our men and women. And there's an answer to it. It doesn't involve getting away from 24s. But our work week has to change if we're going to make a difference on the mental health side, on the cancer, heart disease, obesity, everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the cool thing about all these. It seems like every week or two you see another post on Instagram about a new podcast, or somebody's coming out with something new. And I've said this before on here, if I'd looked at that like, oh crap, well, there's somebody else that people are going to be listening to, and that's going to take away there's not a competition at all. I feel like we are all out here doing this. Well, we're not doing the same thing. We're out here for the same reasons. And we all have our little niches, and everybody's got a little bit of different spot to feel, and different message to share. And that's another reason why I like having people like you on, is because that's what it is to me. It's not a competition. It's not I'm trying to fight for listeners or anything like that. It's just, you're doing good. I want to share that because I want to do good too. And it's a big team, and that's I really have enjoyed that for sure.
Yeah, and I agree completely. I've seen a little bit of the people being threatened, the people that don't seem to share any of the stuff, even if
Yeah.
they're on your show or that kind of thing. But that's a very, very small amount. Most people, I think, understand that we're a tapestry, and there might be, well, not might be, there absolutely are people out there that do not want to hear my show, the way I interview, the fact that I swear, the fact that I'm not of a certain religion, whatever it is. And that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine, because there's another podcast out there where the people and the show format and everything fits the way you like it.
Yeah.
I don't like every music style. I don't like every stand-up comedian. There's stand-up comedians that make me laugh my ass off, and the stand-up comedians that make me want to turn the TV off. So
Yeah.
as long as all of us, like you said, are delivering it, delivering that message in the same way, and even with the guests, like the way I interview someone is going to pull out a certain thing. Someone else
Yeah.
might interview the exact same guest and pull out something completely different. So yeah, being threatened by that, or thinking it's competition, or fighting for an audience. Most people don't even know what a podcast is. It's still a somewhat new format. So there is the entire planet Earth, potentially, that could listen. And there's,
Yeah.
as long as 100 firefighter podcasts get to as many people as they can, then we've all done our job. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think, the moment that that you think that you're being threatened by another podcast, then maybe you shouldn't have a podcast. Because I've, my thing when people call up is I just encourage them and tell them exactly how I did mine, and hope that they stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, what you're just saying right there. That's something that's been a thought that I've had that has been truly kind of eye opening. And that's the fact that, and it doesn't have to be just podcasts, just anything social media. You literally have the opportunity to touch lives around the world. That is there's no joke there. There's no stretching that. You literally have that power.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that is a huge responsibility, because I can either use that power to, put a bunch of crap out that isn't going to add any value to somebody's life, isn't going to add anything, or I can use that chance to really try my best to help somebody. And to me, at least, that is a very powerful thought.
Yeah, and understand as well, and I've learned this the hard way. When you're excited about something that you have, that you're going to put out there, and it's going to make a difference, it's going to be positive, it will be a minute percentage of if you got on a skateboard in a bikini petting a cat and just videoed yourself. Like,
Yeah.
that's just the crazy
Yeah.
world that we live in. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the demoralizing thing. So you got to understand, it's not about metrics. You have to
Yeah.
have the philosophy, like I did with the book, I did with the podcast. If it changes one life, just
Yeah.
one single life, all that effort was worth it. Everything else is a bonus. But I tell you right now, if I put a post about how stupid European helmets are and how pistol grips are for pansies, that post would blow up. Oh my
uh,
God, everyone would love it. But if I
yeah.
post about, hey, here's the next episode of Behind the Show podcast, where a Navy SEAL tells about his mental health struggles, he might get a few likes. Which
Yeah.
one is actually going to make a difference in the world?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Yeah, that is one thing that I've had to kind of work through myself, just as, you know, not letting that frustrate me, because I see that, and I have had that exact thought. It's like, seriously, you know, why is this going crazy? And 6 months down the road, you still see the same stinking post just over and over again. But I get it. It is what it is, and it's just a grind. You just have to keep going. And if you're doing it for what you feel is the right reasons, and you're doing things in the right way, then you know it'll
yeah.
it'll turn up sooner or later. Things will work out. And so yeah, it's
No,
a
I think
it's a
it's
grind.
it's yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to step
No,
over
no,
you,
you're fine.
but I think the perfect analogy is the SCBA. How much resistance was there with that? How much, did probably people think that, that was for pansies too? And now look at it. None of us would go anywhere near a fire without wearing
Yeah.
our mask now, because we get it, we
Yeah.
understand it, and you're a more effective rescuer wearing it. So that's how I look at it. Is I know the people that come on the show truly have the information we need to save lives, whether
Yeah.
it's in our profession itself, or the people that actually are in our profession, the ones that do the job. But they've been fed so much misinformation for so many years. There's this completely backwards philosophy on masculinity, for example, the whole boys don't cry, rub some dirt in it, which is so wrong and so not what I've heard from every single high level tactical operator. but we're up against, the myth that is manliness at the moment and all the other things. So it's
Yeah.
it's going to take patience to
Yeah.
see that slowly, that stigma to be broken as well, and people realize that yeah, no one cares if something's cool. We care if it saves lives and if it does the job. And I
Yeah.
think we need to smash that whole cool facade and get to the nuts and bolts of what's the best way of doing something. Is,
Yeah.
is a clean cab truly going to stop a rescue? No, it's not. So stop saying it. you
Yeah.
know Clean cab's going to stop you inhaling all the crap that you just had on your fire. And if you're so slow that you can't put your SCBA on and run back in and facilitate a rescue after the cab's clean, and let's say the pack's on the outside, which I've had on a tiller truck, then maybe you're not very good at putting your pack on. Maybe that's the
Yeah.
answer. So
Yeah.
yeah, some of these myths that I see, it's like, come on, you're just getting in the way of progress, and that's resulting in men and women dying, which is completely unacceptable.
Yeah. And like you kind of touched on earlier, you've got a wide array of guests, from fire, from police, military, doctors, just an impressive assortment of people from all walks of life. And you kind of talked about having everybody on because everybody is kind of intermingled, and the stories, they have some commonality, and they all work towards the purpose you're going for. And that's kind of been something that I have started realizing myself. I have always been kind of fire focused in the short amount of time I've been doing these with some people that really speak to me as far as fire service leaders. I really try to have people on that I have gotten something out of already, good people. And I've been very lucky to have some really, really great people on. But that's kind of been my thinking here lately is there are so many stories out there outside of the fire service that I would like to hear as well. And people that I would like to meet, and people that I would like to share with the fire service people who are listening. And so that's kind of been something that I've starting to learn myself here lately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, perfect example. I listened to your interview with the stand-up comedian. I think
Yeah.
that's just it. I mean,
Yeah.
there are so many stories, and then there's a lot of men and women out there doing different things now that did what we do. Dave Lee Roth was an EMT. You know, Paul Walker's brother Cody was an EMT. Paul Walker himself is known for Fast and Furious, but has an
Hmm.
amazing charity called Reach Out Worldwide. So that's the thing for me, is that there are just awesome human beings, many of whom do cross pollinate with what we do. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my goal is, if I know Frank Viscuso is a great speaker on leadership, but I want to
Yeah.
hear his personal story. You know,
Yeah.
I want to hear like Danny Dwyer, who made the grab in Atlanta. There's an amazing story about the grab, but when we did our conversation, we talked about the mental health effect, not only of the grab, but also having your whole um, department, you're not whole as far as the men and women, but your
Yeah.
department itself turn their back on you and throw you under the bus. So they're that's the other thing, is taking some of the same names. Some of the names have just done so many classes, FDIC appearances, that I want to learn some of the other
Yeah.
members of the fire service. There's a million of us. There's
Yeah.
the few that we hear over and over and over again. I want to get to some of the others too. It'd
Yeah.
be great to interview some of those names, but the men and women that ride your rig, the men and women in the neighboring station, there are some amazing human beings there, and it might be completely unrelated to their actual profession.
Yeah.
And one of my friends in Orlando, she was homeless and went through the foster system. I mean, some of our backstories are incredible too. So yeah, I think the power of storytelling is really the key, and that's what tribes have done for millennia. It's
Yeah.
what soldiers used to do when they came back from war, and that's how they dealt with mental health. And now we're so disconnected through our phones, through the last year being told to stay in your house and cover your mouth, and I mean, we've done the absolute opposite of what a tribe is supposed to be this last year. So I think that storytelling, whether it's podcasts, obviously books, documentaries, I think that's what people yearn for.
Yeah.
and if it's being told by someone who's respected, which is our profession, we need that as buy-in. That's how you really get some of these key concepts to resonate with people.
Yeah. I think that ties in right along with kind of what we started along with is those are the good stories that need to be out there. That's the stuff that needs to be just flooding the social medias, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So with the wide range of careers and all that guests you've had on, do you find it easy or hard to kind of have these people come on and tell their stories? Does it seem like everybody is pretty much for the most part willing to do that?
Yeah, I would say so. Again, it's trust. My biggest pride is the fact that for whatever reason, I think partly because of the badge that we wear, and then, you know, partly hopefully people now look at the catalog and listen to some of them, they see, okay, this is coming from a good place. But it's about trust. Like if someone's going to open up and tell me that their, darkest days, and I just had Al Benjamin yesterday, who's a retired FDNY Rescue 1 firefighter, in tears talking about 9/11, and so for me, what an honor for that person to be so
Yeah.
vulnerable and trust me with
Yeah.
being the vessel for their story. So that's where it really boils down to. There's some of these people that do lots and lots and lots of podcasts. It's a great conversation, but it doesn't really go there.
Yeah.
Like Jocko Willink's a perfect example. I think he's awesome. He's been on the show twice now, but I'd love to learn about the real Jocko, not the black and white Jocko.
Yeah.
So, but that we're not there yet, and maybe one day, who knows? But so that's a big thing, I think, is trust. And so for you, where you're coming from, for me, where I'm coming from, if people can see that there's no agenda, no ulterior motive, it's not a self-promotion podcast or doing it for the sponsorship or any of this other stuff, that you truly are just trying to share stories and make a difference. I've been very lucky. And obviously, the more I do this, the more trust is built, the
Yeah.
more one of my guests will tell a friend, hey, you should be on James's podcast. That's huge because,
Yeah.
if someone suggests a guest to me and I've had that person on, I respect them. I don't even need to really research them. I know they're a good person,
Yeah.
and vice versa. If they're advocating for the podcast, then that's beautiful. So, but countering that, I want to say this too, because I think this is really important. When I first started the podcast, some of my earliest guests were, my very first one was Mitch Dreyer, who's a fireman who lost an arm in a collapse. An amazing guy. Now he's an adaptive athlete in Colorado. But also Tim Kennedy, the MMA fighter and Green Beret. Sebastian Junger, the author of Tribe and the one that did Restrepo. I think they were definitely my first 10 or so guests. So that's what amazed me as well, is that our profession, they took a chance on this weird Englishman with 0 episodes at that point, and came on where, they were doing other podcasts or interviews with very large organizations. So, I think that speaks volumes on the respect that our profession has as a whole, and
Yeah.
therefore the responsibility we have to act accordingly within our profession.
Yeah. No, that is pretty cool. You have these people on that have done so many great things in their life and have great stories and have other outlets. Like you said, this was at the point where there's way bigger things they can be doing, but still giving you that opportunity. That is a pretty neat deal for sure. That's something. And you said it right out of the gate. If you're hosting a podcast, or hopefully you're basically a sponge of all of these guests. And I kind of mentioned, I totally agree with that. And I've really started trying to pay attention to that stuff, trying to absorb as much as I can. All of these conversations I really enjoy, but it's easy to just kind of enjoy the moment and enjoy a good conversation, but not really let some of this stuff sink in. And so that's been another focus of mine, is just really trying to learn from these conversations.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard too. I mean, I do 3 a week now, so that's a lot of a lot of
Wow.
great information. So what I've found is there's a lot of, osmosis going on too. So you have
Yeah,
this conversation. If someone says, "Hey, what did that person say?" I'm like, you know what? That's a good point. I'm not sure if I remember everything, but then when it's triggered by a question, like specifically, then you're like, "Oh, that's right. So and so said this and this."
yeah,
So it is in there. But yeah, I think when you have a lot of these in-depth conversations, you feel like you forgot a lot.
yeah.
But you didn't. It just, there's so much to be filed. So I mean, yeah, 90 minutes is a long time for someone to
Yeah,
really, disseminate information. um so yeah, but I mean, obviously, I'm trying always to be focused. I'm always researching the guests before to ask the kind of questions that I think people would want asked. But yeah, I've got 407 episodes out now, 406. That's a, a lot of
yeah,
information. So you
yeah,
know sometimes I listen to some of the older ones if they're coming back on again. I'm like, oh, I forgot we talked about that. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's, I've got 100-mile commute between where I live and the firehouse. And so, it's an hour, a little over hour and a half both ways, which I've always been asked, how do you do it? I would hate that. Does it suck? All this stuff. And I'm like, I enjoy it. I don't think I've ever just looked at it like, oh, I hate driving that far. But this is exactly why I don't hate it. This is why I love it, because that's what I do, is I listen to podcasts or books. And so, that being said, even having that hour and a half drive to work, there are so many podcasts out there that I want to listen to. There's just not enough time. Even
Hmm.
even having that drive, there's so many. You mentioned Jocko, and man, his run 2-3 hours plus sometimes, and it's just, you just don't have enough time of the day to do it. But I there are so many good things out there that you can listen to, and I attribute a lot of the growth I've had personally in the past year to spending that hour and a half going to and from work listening to stuff like that, because that's a great time to learn. And so I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I always said this the same thing. Like, mine was a 70-mile commute each way, so 140 round trip. And my goal was to arrive to the firehouse smarter than when I left my house. So, and
Yeah,
that was always it. Yeah, and I agree completely. Like, I like audiobooks. Some of them are a little drawn out,
yeah,
so I prefer podcasts, because if I get that author on someone's podcast, they really tend to tease out the main points.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, but I mean, but there are some great books that are, you know, I like the leaner writing, put it that
mhm,
way. But yeah, I mean, either of those formats are just great. And I love, sometimes I'll turn off the radio completely, sometimes I listen to music, but especially like a freeway commute where there's no real change of
yeah,
environment, it's a great place, and it really does make the time fly. But you're not wishing away time; you're actually just spending that time wisely.
yeah, absolutely. And so, talking about books, and you mentioned it really briefly earlier, you have authored a book. And so, kind of talk about that. Tell us a little bit about the One More Light.
Yeah. So um, about 4 years ago, I wrote my first blog. You're okay, baby. You can come. So my wife's walking in.
That's right.
So yeah, I wrote my first blog, and it was kind of a weird thing. I came off from a call, and it was, I don't know, let's say the call finished at 2. So I went and lay down in the bunk room, and just my head was just spinning. And we'd had some suicides recently in our area. I'd lost one of my firefighters to an opioid overdose, so there was a lot of that kind of going on. Um, and so I got back up at like 3 in the morning. I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna sit down and write. So I wrote a blog called "I Wish My Head Could Forget What My Eyes Have Seen," which is a quote from Dave Parnell from Burn. Um, and wrote it, put it out there. I already had my website from the podcast, so put it out as a blog post. Went to bed, and then when I woke up, it had gone viral, and I was like, oh wow, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. And so I ended up writing more blogs. And so after, I don't know, a year or so, I was like, I wonder if I've got enough here to make a book. But it wasn't there yet. I wasn't there yet mentally.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of put it away, let the blog sit where they were. There was one I wrote, I don't know, about a year later. And then ironically, at the beginning of 2020, something clicked. And I was like, all right, I think it's time. So I started taking those blogs, kind of trying to expand on them a little bit more, because obviously a blog is a very short format. And through, a lot of this pandemic, just kept writing and writing and writing. I'd had Josh Brolin on the show by that point, and we've become really good friends. So I sent him, Jason Casper, who's a Green Beret, who's an author as well, and some other friends, some of these copies. Even Sebastian, I'd sent him my blog, and started getting this feedback. And I'm like, all right, this is obviously a thing then. So Josh was actually kind enough to agree to do the forward, which was absolutely massive. And so I collated basically stories from my life. Some are fire related, some are not, but then each chapter, the gear is geared towards a lesson learned. So it's not a biography, it's not a, hey, I'm the greatest whatever in the world. Quite the opposite. It's a normal person's. I wasn't at the Vegas shooting, the World Trade, the Thai tsunami. I wasn't at any of those. I'm just the other 9% of the population in our profession. But I wanted to address cancer, obesity, sleep deprivation, back injuries, strength and conditioning, all these things that I had encountered in my life, put it into that storytelling that we were talking about, but then that story transitions into lessons learned and highlights some of the people that I've had on the show that have some great answers, whether it's Eric Goodman with back injuries or Johan Hari on addiction and the drug policies we have at the moment. So I just wanted it to be a book of questions. So when you read it, you don't go, oh, James's Guide to How to Be Awesome in Life. No, it's all right. Now you've given me the key to the lock for my own personal journey. And then now you go down the rabbit hole. And then obviously the podcast is a great resource then to start learning about these things that I talk about in the book, but from the experts, not from me, but from the people who actually spent their life studying these. So that was it really. It was just another format to try and make a difference. So the paperback and the ebook were out late last year. They're on Amazon, and I'm literally just uploading the chapters now this next couple of days. And the audiobook, I think it's up to 30 days before it goes live. So definitely, early to mid-February, the audiobook will be out too.
Good deal. That's pretty cool. So one more time, that's One More Light, and it's kind of the subtitle is Life, Death, and Humility Through the Eyes of a Firefighter. So it sounds like a pretty cool deal. I need to definitely get that and check that out for sure.
Absolutely. Actually, I think it's humanity. Yeah, humanity through the
Oh, I'm
eyes.
sorry.
But it's
There you
funny
go.
because when I sent it the first time, I put humility on my own. So I even made that mistake on the cover. And
I
just so
think,
people listening, that the title is a Linkin Park story. Linkin Park song. And it's ironic because this year, with the whole whose life matters argument that we've seen, which is so ridiculous, their whole song is basically about, who cares if one light goes out? Well,
I got you.
we do, firefighters, police officers. I mean, we
Yeah.
do. That's why we
Hopefully.
signed
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the concept. So if anyone recognizes that title, yes, it's a direct quote of Linkin Park.
Gotcha. So you talked about some of your more kind of established guests, I guess you could call them. Have you ever had a guest on that you kind of felt a little starstruck about, or nervousness or anything like that?
Not so much starstruck. It's I maybe because of the upbringing, like we said on the farm. Growing up
Yeah.
around, meeting all these people of all these walks of life. They're just people.
Yeah.
So I get excitement, like when I just interviewed the Norday brothers, the two French brothers that made 9/11 and did the Netflix special on the
Oh
Paris
yeah.
shootings.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get them for 4 years. So I was just so excited, but they were so amazing that it was such an easy interview. It really was. But I've over prepared before. My first interview with Jocko, I over prepared absolutely, because I listened to him so much anyway that I kind of psych myself out a little bit. The
Yeah.
second one was they were both great, but the second one was a lot more organic, a lot more. I was ready for his one word answers too, so I had a lot more,
That's
just in case. But it was a
uh,
great conversation. It was a kind of early COVID as well, so very pertinent. But yeah, so it's not, like I said, it's not starstruck. There are definitely some high profile people I'd love to get on one day. But I mean, to me, I give the same level of preparation, same level of respect, because you know, Danny, for example, prior to his grab was another firefighter,
yep,
and he's one of my most downloaded episodes,
yep,
So um, if I'm able to get that human being to engage me as another human being and have a down to earth conversation, then that's the only um, test I think for an interviewer, is just to be honest and get that person to trust you. So, but yeah, I've definitely, like I said, I've over prepared, and there's also been some that I didn't even get close to that. It was a very generic interview, and it was a shame, but
yep,
I wasn't able to really penetrate the facade. But most of them are. So, but I just the same as 4 years in, I'm still learning. I'm
yeah.
still working on my craft of being a student of their work, and also trying to ask the questions that I think would benefit the people listening.
Yeah. Yeah. You saying that, it kind of brings up an interesting thought for me about myself. Is it's funny me sitting here thinking that I want to work on my interviewing skills. I want to be a better interviewer because I just that's really not who I am. This whole deal for me is just out of character.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I want to learn how to be better. I want to make it more entertaining and allow people to enjoy these conversations more. And that's exactly what you have to do, is you got to get better at just being a host. And I don't know how you do that. You just maybe over time or what, but it's just weird saying that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the irony, is it's not really becoming an interviewer, it's becoming a listener. So that
Yeah.
applies to all walks. And
Yep.
you've probably had this, I'm sure you've heard these interviews where the host is so excited to tell their part of the story that they just walk all over the guest. And I've
Yes.
had it. I heard one the other day. It was funny, where the guest basically told him to shut up so he could actually talk. But it needed to, because they just kept, it was two hosts, and they just kept bouncing
Yeah.
off each other, and the third guy barely got to talk. So I think really it's communication, it's listening. And
Yeah.
in a world where we tend to step over each other, we're so excited to say our response. And you probably find the same thing. Sometimes you're like, and I find this, so I write a lot of notes when I'm interviewing,
Yeah.
so that way it's like I won't forget it. I'll write it down, and then when we circle round and they're done with their
Yep.
thought process, then I can say, hey, well, earlier you said this, and I
Yep.
haven't interrupted them. They've been able to fully unravel their thoughts, and then I can get back to whatever point I thought was pertinent when they were talking.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. You are you are a the better listener you are as a host, the better I think you will do as a host. And that's a great point. And I'm just like you. If I don't sit here and write something, like if you're going into maybe a 5 minute kind of spiel about something, and something reaches out to me, if I don't write that down by the time you're done, there's no way I'm ever going to remember what that is. So I definitely have to do that same thing as well.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I've enjoyed kind of, it's a comfort zone thing. Like I said, this is outside of who I am, but at the same time, I've really enjoyed stepping out and getting into that arena outside of my comfort zone. Do you do you kind of feel like you had a little bit of that same story, or does this come natural to you?
Oh, no, no. If you told me 5 years ago I was going to be a podcast, I hope I would have slapped you in the face. I'd be like, no.
Yeah.
No, it was like I said, it was one of those things where they say if you're looking for something and you can't find it, that's your sign. And that was it. And
Yep.
so no, I'm I just learned recently, because I had a guy who wrote a book on introverts, called The Introvert's Edge. And I just learned recently that I'm an introvert. And his definition, which is very interesting, is it's where you get your energy from. If you thrive in crowds and that's you're drawn to them to kind of power up, then you're probably an extrovert. For me,
Yeah.
it's the opposite. Like I host this show now, listen to millions of times, and my lip still quivers when I speak, in front of a
Yeah.
group. So it's just that's not
Yeah.
my thing. But so it was definitely out of comfort zone. But I think again, because there wasn't that element of starstruck or being in awe, but just having mutual respect and talking person to person, it took a lot of that pressure away. And then it was just a case, like you said, I can't control what the other person says, but I can control if I make them feel comfortable. I can control if
Yeah.
I shut the hell up and let them talk. And then I can control if I research them and therefore ask good questions and show them as well that I care. Like I know that they wrote this book. I know they were on this podcast with this person. I know that they had this particular experience in their life. So then, as a podcast guest, just as you've mentioned the book and everything, it shows the you feel as a guest, okay, this person knows who I am. There's nothing worse than listening to an interview and you can tell by the questions that the host has
Yeah.
no idea. And you see this a lot on TV, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's just it. But it's just because of the profession that we love, there's something exciting as well about being out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So I didn't find it uncomfortable because it's what we do as a job anyway.
Yeah. And one more thing before we kind of move on beyond that and probably start wrapping up here pretty quick. But before we push record, I gave him my little spiel on it's just very informal and I try to not script anything, really just write a few notes. And you said something that was very interesting to me, and I wanted to make sure to write it down before I started recording. But you said that you enjoy that format much more because sometimes you sit there as you're talking and you actually surprise yourself. You things will come out that really you weren't expecting. And I know exactly what you're talking about because I've had that same thing to me. And I actually think that's probably one of the coolest things that I've experienced in this journey is you're just in a conversation, you're learning from whoever you're talking with, and then you're hit all of a sudden with something that's like, wow, you're absolutely right, or whatever. And I didn't want to move on without saying that because that is a pretty cool deal right there when you just allow things to be fluid and kind of go with it.
Yeah, well, it's being present. Like we started having that conversation because sometimes when I'm on a show, people will send questions or vice versa, a guest will ask questions. And I'll tell them like, here's some topics I would love to cover,
Yeah.
but there's no set questions. It's because I think then you're forced to be in the moment. And it's
Yeah.
just something that a lot of us find ourselves far from, especially it's hard to be in the moment when you're in a station waiting for the tones to go off and you're being told that you're going to test hydrants at this time and you got to do your target solutions, your online studying here, and we're just
Yeah.
constantly pulled from all directions. So to be present where you're in almost like a conversational flow state where no matter what you ask, you're not going to get flustered because they're not trying to trick you.
Yeah.
We're not on CNN or Fox. This is a normal human being conversation,
Yeah.
not some clickbait bullshit, where it doesn't matter what you ask because the organic response, like you said, may even invoke something that you'd never thought about. So
Yeah.
I find it very exciting and very enjoyable just to have you know a present conversation with another person.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that, like I said, that is one of the most enjoyable things about this for myself as well. So James talked about your podcast. We talked about your book that you have out right now. What else are you involved in? Anything else, projects that you want to talk about before we get off?
No, I mean that's that's taken up a lot of my time. 2020 has been horrendous for some people. I totally understand, and I think that people that had businesses that were affected, it's been an awful year, but it's been a very productive year. So the book, like I said, has been written, One More Light, so that's available on Amazon. The podcast you can find on all platforms, Behind the Shield. So I think less is more is what I'm looking forward to when the audiobook is done, just being present and being more of a student. Like I used to take a lot of time watching documentaries, listening to other podcasts, reading other books, and I've got a pile of books that I got to read now. So
Yeah.
it'll be more back into the, not reclusive, but being more of a student again. With writing a book, I feel like I was actually not the teacher, but I was there was output. Now I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to input again, and just just being quiet and finding some new amazing people that have solutions to some of the things that we're going through.
Yeah. So what would you say inspires you right now?
Um, I mean, honestly, there's a few key areas that I know if we adopted them would save so many lives. So I'm inspired by people who have solutions that have been proven to be working already. So, like I said, I harp on about it a lot, in my work, but sleep deprivation. If we were able to make the 42-hour work week a industry standard the same way they do in the northeast of the US with 24/72s, we would revolutionize the fire service. If we were able to remove drug prohibition, so addicts became medical patients and not criminals, we would revolutionize the health of the nation, and then the criminal justice system as well. So those are two kind of core parts of what I'm pushing for. I've had prisons that do an amazing job. For example, in Norway, I've had people in the education system in Finland. I think the national health in the UK is incredible when it's funded properly, where people aren't 80 years old standing in Walmart greeting because they can't afford their insurance. So it's just trying to find more of these amazing people that have found actionable solutions. Because just as I told you, with the whole, uh, you know, clickbait in the fire service with the leather helmets and the pistol grips and all this crap, it's the same with health. Like we know these medications do not save lives because we work those codes every single shift, and these people have bags of these meds and they
Yeah.
still die.
Yeah.
So taking a step back, asking, is this the best way of doing it? Looking around this beautiful planet that we inhabit and finding nations that do it better than us. And obviously the US is doing some things better than the rest of the world. That is it, delivering that message of humility, getting us to, to kind of deviate from that whole saying insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results, because that is what we're doing at the moment. So trying to push that message more and truly save lives. Like if we can have this gusto behind hand sanitizers and masks, imagine what we could do with clean food, exercise, and cleaning up the environment.
Yeah.
It'll be revolutionary.
I gotcha. It's a pretty good message right there to be pushing for sure. I know that I think part of just, I'm not putting words in your mouth here, but I feel like part of what makes you as successful as you've been is that passion, like you just shared right there. If you're doing something that you feel so passionate about and you're doing it because you know that it's the right thing to do, that is going to push you so much farther than if you're just doing it because it's just something to do. And so I really have enjoyed kind of soaking up some of that passion, and glad that you're one of the voices out there sharing that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And this has been fun too. Like I really enjoy doing podcasts. Like I said, I've only done a handful, but it does, give me a chance then to, like I said, kind of send back some of the
Yeah.
things that I've learned. And obviously, my experiences as an individual as well. But yeah, I always enjoy these conversations. So thank you for stepping up and starting your project too.
I appreciate that. So let everybody out there know where they can find you, find your books, whatever you want to put out there.
All right. Well, I had a very cool moment the other day. I asked Alexa if she knew who James Geering was, and she said, "Oh yeah, he wrote this book." So,
Nice.
so you can ask Alexa. No, but realistically, so the Behind the Shield podcast is on all the platforms as far as I'm aware. Please let me know if you find one it's not. And then the website is jamesgeering.com, because Behind the Shield was taken. And then the book, like I said, is on paper and electronic formats on Amazon. By the time we get to early or mid-February, that should be on Audible and Apple and those ones too. The book is called One More Light: Life, Death, and Humanity Through the Eyes of a Firefighter. And then if you want to reach out to me, Instagram is my favorite medium. That's the one where people actually seem to get to see my posts. Facebook, I have 5,000 friends, quote unquote. And I think, probably 12 of them actually ever get to see what I post.
Yeah.
Twitter, again, pointless, but it's there just so people can reach me. But yeah, Behind the Shield on Instagram, Behind the Shield 911, I think is the handle. That's the best social media platform that I use.
Sounds great. I appreciate your time very much. I had a good time. I definitely learned something from you, and just look forward to what comes in the future.
Beautiful. Well, same to you. Like, I always learn from all these conversations. That's why I think we do what we do. Again, thank you to everyone out there who's holding the line. I mean, it's funny that the mission changed. I wanted to help people, but after 14 years, the crossroads came where I seem to be making more of a difference doing this full time than running one call at a time. But
Yeah.
I have so much admiration for the men and women out there doing what we do, and my mission is to make it safer for us, so that we do get to enjoy that retirement after we've been away from our families for decades. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being part of that.
You're welcome. I appreciate it, and look forward to getting you on again. Thanks, James.
Thank you.